when my dad started this morning, like, just convulsing and coughing up this thick white mucus, I'm like, oh, his stomach is clearing, dysbiotic, the buildup of like dead dysbiotic microbes that were coating the lining of his stomach and inhibiting the ability of nutrition to enter into his bloodstream. But if I didn't know panchakarma, that would have been scary. Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Thrive with Kate podcast, formerly the Yoga Healer podcast. And I'm here with Dr. Bryan Miller, who's been on the show before, with the late Light Miller, and Greg Soucy, who's a dear old friend. And these two healers have worked together in the past. So this is going to be kind of a cozy conversation among colleagues. So we all have a background in Ayurveda, in panchakarma, in detox. Bryan and Greg also have a background in Kayakalpa, and that's what I'm interested in learning about on this show. And we all have used, to some degree or another, also psychedelic plant medicines and synthetics to elevate consciousness, for stage of life changes, for detox and rejuvenative effects. So this conversation will go all over the place in all of those domains. So what I want to kick us off a bit about is this use of all the different kinds of medicines, all the different kinds of plant medicines for sacred purposes, really bringing this back into the power of the people. Today, I did a psychedelic ceremony using psilocybins and a little bit of MDMA with my parents. It was their first time experience. And we did it because my dad was dying. He had lost his appetite. He was losing his ability to digest and eliminate food. He was losing his mobility. Just all systems were shutting down. And I had predicted this would happen after a few months ago, because he was signed up for his next colonoscopy. He has had cancer 4 times, and I was like, if you don't replenish your microbiome, like eventually it won't be able to come back. And so I wanted him to use a saltwater flush. So in Ayurveda, we use things to flush the physiology and then rebuild microbiome. So in any case, Bryan and I were talking, and Bryan shared this. I loved what you said about using MDMA and LSD together for almost more of like a celebration or a connection ceremony. Is that how you would describe it?
I would describe it as I seem to lose my universal connection over time. And so for me, it's like a sacrament to reconnect. And I find it interesting that the cows are sacred to the Hindus, and everywhere the cows go, the psilocybin mushrooms grow. And so if you're, in the fields with the cows, worshiping them, and you want to get connected to God, it's always just right there. I mean, I think it's purposeful, and it's spread all over the world, from India, these mushrooms. So I don't see it as an accident, or I think it's purposely left there like a trail of breadcrumbs for us to find our way back to God.
What I so resonate and love about that, because I'm on a huge cowpathy tour right now, which is taking me to a what is it called? A Grakshala in India, a cowshala. Because the cow, what I've learned is when humans started agriculture, so 10,000 years ago, that's when we started to borrow the cow's microbiome. And since the end of the small farm, now we're losing the human microbiomes down at least 30%. And that's really what happened, to my dad, loss of microbial diversity. So as we reconnect to the cow, as we milk the cow, as we use things like panchagavya, cow poop, cow urine, et cetera, as medicines to restore the microbiome, rather than like a fecal transplant or like a poop pill, we use the cows, and that's how in Ayurveda it was always traditionally used. The sacred altars were washed with cow dung juice, and this was the complete mix of bacteria and viruses in the temporal, in the now, evolving in real time with us. And as we reconnect to that, it restores the microbiome as well. So Greg, tell us a little bit about your connection to Panchakarma and Kayakalpa, and why you lead people on Panchakarma week-long retreats. Like where does that fit into your world?
Well, I like it because it takes you back to the basics, right? I mean, it rebalances your body, mind, and spirit, gets it all on one page. I learned it from Bryan and Light. It was purely by accident. We were over there and Bryan asked me one day, hey, do you want to do a Panchakarma? I'm like, sure, what is that? And so Delaney and I went having no clue, she especially, he explained it at least a little bit to me. And then Delaney and I went, and she was in the shock of her world because she didn't know what was going on and what was involved, but she went with it, we went with it. And it was, how many times did I say, Bryan, during the session, I need to learn how to do this. Bryan kept saying, just receive. We'll talk about that later. I was like so fascinated and so knew that's what I needed to take as the next step.
So you were already a body worker for years and years.
Yeah. And then Bryan and I met in Yalapa, and then we became friends. And then one day, hey, we're leaving soon. Would you like to do a Panchakarma before I leave? So I said yes. I went with Selene and another massage therapist. We went, and the three of us had an amazing time and an amazing experience. And then a few weeks later, we met up with them in Sarasota, and we did a 6-month-long training program working with Bryan and Light. And so it's really brought around amazing things for me in my life, and clarity and vision. And I knew I needed to share and wanted to be a participant of sharing this with more people in the world. And so that's part of the reason we like to continue to do these, and we share with people who are open and receptive and are open to doing it for the right purposes, because sometimes they're not always on the right base before, and not everybody is ready for it.
Yeah, let's talk about that. I mean, because when I look back at what we know from Ayurvedic training, like anyone who's trained in Ayurveda knows the Pancha karmas, right? These 5 actions, Pancha 5, karma actions, these 5 ways that the body removes disease. And so, when my dad started this morning, just convulsing and coughing up this thick white mucus, I'm like, oh, his stomach is clearing, dysbiotic, the buildup of dead dysbiotic microbes that were coating the lining of his stomach and inhibiting the ability of nutrition to enter into his bloodstream. But if I didn't know Panchakarma, that would have been scary.
It would have been scary, all that stuff coming up, and bile.
And so I would have thought something was wrong, but because of Panchakarma training, I know something's right. Do you guys want to speak to that, to the process and how we have to educate people about in Panchakarma, what can happen and how disease moves out of the body?
First of all, the body is always cleansing, and it's always building. And during the day, it has its cycle of building and cleansing. And Ayurveda has its schedule so you can be in alignment with that and support it. But then, life has a way of sort of catching up to you and building up and overwhelming you, so that sometimes you get out of balance. Even if you know a few things, life can kind of take control, and you put off some of the health practices to get stuff done. And then you're behind the 8 ball with your elimination portion of your process, or your nutrition is blocked by waste or ama. So the Panchakarma is like a reset. It's like clear the decks, start from new, get back to basics, And my wife, she called it the big gun of Ayurveda. You know, in medicine, the doctors that got their big gun of, you know, chemotherapy and surgery. Well, in Ayurveda, we don't have that. We've got panchakarma and other ceremonial things. And Greg and I have both seen patients that were given the death sentence on death's door, didn't know what else to do, did a panchakarma and turned it around and surprised the doctors by living a long time, much more healthily than they ever would have given them a chance for. So we always saw panchakarma as being the big gun of Ayurveda. And the funny thing is that in the East, you have to do 21 days or they laugh at you. No, you cannot do a week. No, you cannot do 14 days. I'm sorry, that's not panchakarma. So, but you know, we're Americans and it's hard to get an American to do a full week. I mean, they might get 2 weeks vacation. So Light and I would do 3-day, we'd do 5-day, we'd do 7-day. We very seldom did 14 or 21, but sometimes it happened. And we still got great results. So,
Greg,
Absolutely.
yeah, and Greg, if you can explain too about like what panchakarma is, that would probably be helpful for people who are like, what are they talking about?
Basically, it's a cleanse of all your organ systems. So how Light orchestrated the week-long panchakarma is the first day is liver, stomach, colon. Second day is liver, gallbladder. Third day is kidneys. So obviously, those are your most toxic organs. So what we do right away is we cleanse all of them. So on each day, all the teas, all the juices, all the essential oils that we use in the Marma point massage, and all the foods that you consume are all geared towards that day's system. And then we're also doing colonics on each of those first 3 days. So you're really getting a flush. You're getting, on the colonic day, you're getting your colon cleansed. On the liver day, you're getting liver flushed and teas that are a little more bitter and astringent to stimulate the liver and flush it through the gallbladder and get rid of all the crud. On the kidneys, you pee like crazy that day because we do different teas and fruit juices and whatnot to move and flush those organs. Then on the 4th day, we would go to lungs. And then on the 5th day, circulation, the heart. The 6th day was more reproduction and or boosting the immune system. So by the end of the week, you're really purified. You're really rejuvenated. Your whole system is vibrating in happiness. And so that's the basics of what the week-long panchakarma is. Then on the 7th day, you rest and we consult with you and give you the plan of how to maintain this feeling. You know, recommended foods, stay away from these ones, eat more of these ones. You know, here's a tea, make it, use it every day, every week, you know, and then after a few months, well, you call us and we can do another tea because we'll do another pulse assessment and then we'll see where you're at because those things change as we evolve.
I mean, one of the things that we all know about working in panchakarma is it's a lot of hands-on work, right? There's a lot of hands-on care and work. And to me, it's the opposite of the allopathic model where we're using machines and medications largely, right?
Yeah.
To heal. And so for the experience and nourishment, do you want to share, Greg, just what that experience is like for someone who's never experienced that much hands-on attention in a week while their body is releasing?
Well, it's interesting because a lot of people are like, because we do everything. We cook, we clean, we feed you, we take care of you, we console you when the emotions come up, especially during
and
the
they will come up even for, I remember being on the table and just, it was coming up.
And so we're there. It is a very labor of love, intensive thing that we're willing to do. Why? Because we love it and we have shared it and we've experienced it and we want to share it more. Now, one of the main things is people have to be ready. At least we have to acknowledge that they need to acknowledge that stuff will come up and it will be uncomfortable and it will be difficult. and just to keep going, because the light at the end of the tunnel is really miraculous, and everyone should embrace that light.
Yeah. Yeah. Anything you want to add, Bryan?
Well, I will give a caveat. Light Miller definitely went her own way with everything that she did, including Panchakarma. And she would always refer back to the quote that Ayurveda is reinvented from age to age, that it's always renewing itself. It's not a static body of knowledge. Yes, there is a tradition within it, but it's an evolving science. And all the information we're gathering now about modern medicine, CAT scans, MRIs, all of that information can be incorporated into Ayurvedic wisdom if there's somebody takes the time to do it. So Light studied with many teachers before she came back to Ayurveda. She studied with Dr. Jensen. She studied Ayurveda, aromatherapy, which is not traditionally a part of Ayurveda. Historically it is, but it got dropped for medicated oils. So Light brought a renewal to everything that she taught. And so her system of doing a different organ each day, I don't know that that's traditional or that anyone else is doing that. And I also brought some things, and I come from a background of forgiveness ritual, Course of Miracles, all kinds of inner work on our relationships. And so I brought Tarpana, which is mentioned by Zaboda in his book Prakruti, but only a page. But I took that healing ceremony of healing with your ancestors, and I applied it to myself, had a wonderful breakthrough with my gallbladder, which I realized had come from my maternal grandmother, who was a very small Vata, bitter woman. And I'm very thin, sometimes bitter Vata man. And I had her gallbladder. And she was my least favorite grandparent. And I had to do a healing with her about that and see her beauty and see and see that, I have her genetics in me. I better be at peace with them. If I'm at war with them, my body is at stake. So I came to peace with her, came to peace with the genetics I got from her. And then I brought that into Ayurveda in a more full way. And Greg picked up on that. And everybody that we taught Panchakarma, the Tarpana ceremony is part of every day of Panchakarma. And people do 1 or 2 or 3 relationships a day. They tackle them, take them in, breathe with them, speak all the unspoken things. And so I actually wrote a couple-page article that was in a journal called Light on Ayurveda on updated Panchakarma, Light Miller's updated Panchakarma. And I'll make that available to you. You can put it in your notes for people.
Yeah, we'll put that in the show notes. Yeah, and we can also.
About
yeah, go ahead.
Traditional Panchakarma and what Light did to take it to a new level.
Oh, fantastic. And I know that because I was trained as a Panchakarma therapist at the California College of Ayurveda. And then I was a second to an Ayurvedic doctor from India and for her San Francisco practice. And then I studied in India. And then I was a client of Greg's doing the Bryan and Light Miller and Greg Soucy Panchakarma. And what I loved, just the fresh juices, everything Greg just described that him and Selene do down in where we live down in Mexico, near Vallarta, Puerto Vallarta. So those fresh juices, the herbal teas specific to the day, the specific foods to the day, that it's not just this, rice and mung bean and vegetable mono diet is as often taught. I just want to reference while we're on it, we have 2 podcasts on ancestral healing, Tarpana, Tarpana, that will also link in the show notes for those who want to be guided in a practice with that. So let's talk talk next about Kayakalpa.
Kayakalpa is an ancient healing ceremony that is reputed to rejuvenate old people and bring them back to like they're 45. Their hair turns black again. They grow new teeth. Their arthritis disappears. Their muscles come back, and they're flexible again instead of being stiff. It's like they're totally rejuvenated. And there's a book which I referred to, KC, called it's called Maharaj, the life story of Tapaswiji, blah, blah, blah. But in that one, this guy claimed to live to be 200 years old or 180. He had 3 different sessions of Kayakalpa, and each time he'd been doing tapas in cold waterfalls, meditating with cold water over his head, sitting in a ring of cow dung fires the summer months, just baking in the open sun for 12 hours a day. And his body would be trashed after 30 or 40 years of these austerity practices. And so he would find someone who would do Kayakalpa on him. For first time was a month, and then it was 3 months, and the final time it took a year. But they would put him in darkness, in quiet, feed him special herbs, and he would come out of the hut, whatever time period it was, 45 again, new teeth, black hair, strong body. And so that's the story. And Light studied with this man, but he wouldn't tell her any of the secrets. So she did go to India looking for another Kayakalpa teacher and practitioner, and eventually found one. And he took her to the mountains to a secret Kayakalpa healing center and practiced with her until he felt like she had the basics that she hadn't gotten from this other guy. And then Light came back to Hawaii and taught me. And then we started traveling around doing it all over the world, and ran into Greg and whatnot. There's 2 types. There's the Kayakalpa Vasashika, which is for the layman. And that's where you have a single experience or several or a handful of experiences, each one over about 5-6 hours time. It's similar to Panchakarma in that there are stages that you do each time, and they involve, first of all, if it's the first time, it'd be a consultation, your Ayurvedic type, what foods you should eat, what herbs you should drink, blah, blah, blah. And then the treatment itself would involve laying down on a table and having a hot herbal paste spread onto the body. And it's called the treatment of extremes because it goes on very hot. And then
What's in it? Is it peppers or?
It's like one of those secret 108, Rasayana rejuvenative herbs. It's got.
Is it like a Mahanarayan kind of a with the heat, or?
No, it's like a mask, a body mask.
Imagine Chovan Prash, but sticky.
Okay, with like Mahanarayan type ingredients in it, with like super hot, super heating things that increase circulation.
No,
or?
it wasn't that. It was actually hot from physical fire. So it was warm, and it had all these Rasayana herbs that were made.
So it really was like Chavan Prash.
Rasayana oils that would absorb through the skin, and you went on hot, so that was uncomfortable. And
so
then
it's not like shatavari and ashwagandha and ghee and jaggery and all that kind of.
It could have some of that in it, like secret. I don't know.
Okay.
We would buy it from a special provider that we haven't been able to find it from for a while. So we had to start making our own. But the important thing is the second part of the treatment is while it dries on you, it has quite a bit of menthol and it's very cooling. So first you're hot and then you're freezing. And so it's like being in Wyoming and you go out and roll in the snow after doing a sauna. Yeah, it's bracing. Well, you have to get out of your head
Yeah.
to be with your body this cold and this hot and this uncomfortable. You have to be comfortable with being uncomfortable,
Yeah.
which is a process in itself. And it takes about a half an hour to do one side of the body. Then you rub it off, which is very vigorous and somewhat
Uncomfortable.
somewhat uncomfortable rubbing it off. It comes off like a facial mask, and then brushes, a real strong skin brush to get it off. And then they oil you with Rasayana oils, and then they flip you over and do the other side. So face down.
And this is every day.
You're hot and then cold. This is in a single treatment. And then once that's gone, we flip you over, and the whole time you're doing this first portion, you're doing a special Kayakalpa breath, which is in through the nose and out through the mouth with a sigh. So it's like, oh. And you just do that for an hour continuously. And you get really high because you're doing a Moed Bandha contraction on the inhale and releasing it on the exhale. So you're moving stuff up through the inner flute, the whole treatment, up and down through the inner flute, up through the Sushumna, the Inga, the Pingala, everything is moving, all the energies. And then we're doing Shirodhara on you for about a half an hour while we fill a hot herbal bath. So you go from the Shirodhara where you go out of your body. Most people at this point, Greg, tell me what happens after an hour.
Yeah, what happens, Greg?
Well, they're gone. I mean, they can barely move afterwards. They're just gone. We have to literally like lift them and put many times. Once in a while, a PETA person can get up themselves and walk themselves into the tub. But generally, no. We have to almost literally carry them and walk them through, slip them into the hot tub, and then they go,
it's too hot. It's too hot. So again, the treatment of extremes. So then what do? We start doing breath of fire and primal scream. And then between bouts of that, we have them speaking to their ancestors. Father, what I want you to know is I hated how you controlled me. Everything,
whatever's left, right? Like whatever's left.
Until finally you come to the place where Father, what I realize now is that's how you were showing your love. That's how you were taking care of me, being the best dad you knew how to be. I took it all wrong. I see it now. You loved me. And anyway, so it's very healing. Then you go on to the next person and more breath of fire and more primal scream. And the water is hot. I mean, the sweat is just streaming off the people. And then we're fully immersing them into the hot water. So it's not a comfortable treatment.
Well, I just want to really parallel this because I know a lot of the people listen to my podcast and a lot of people in Club Thrive. It's like they understand that they understand sadhana, they understand practice, they understand tapas or the friction of evolution. And when we look at what allopathy does far and away is it numbs us out, right? There's like anesthesia, there's pharmaceuticals which dumb down our energy fields and increase our dysbiotic microbes, right? That start to trash the microbiome. There's this sense of you don't have to do the hard thing. We will take care of you. And when we're talking about panchakarma and we're talking about kayakalpa, and we're talking about yoga and pranayama, breathing practices, or primal
we're talking about being uncomfortable.
And doing it because we know that if you put in the hard work in the right way, there's a big payoff. And then no one else can do it for you. I mean, we can be assisted by wonderful people like Greg and Selene, or, in the past, Bryan and Light. But there's the sense of like, your healers can only get you so far, and the rest, you got to take yourself across the threshold there. Like, you've got to show up and breathe. You can't just do nothing. You can't just check out. You've got to check in to your ancestors.
Absolutely. Right. You check out, you do check out.
And the tapas, the gift of the tapas is you realize you have a body, but you're not the body. You don't have to register the cold. It's like the Iceman treatments in the cold water. it's like you learn to get past caring.
Yeah.
And there's a gift in that, you know?
That's the next phase. After the heat, we flush you with icy cold water in the
Right over the top of the head, cold water. And at that point, we have people doing their affirmations. I am peace. I am love. I am connected to all things. I am one with God. And the cold water is just bringing them back into the body after being. So it's a very strange treatment for Westerners. But the other way that this treatment was used was not just in a single incidence, which gives people great insight into the true nature of their being, but as a rejuvenative therapy for an elderly yogi or an elderly practitioner. It's a way to get back that youth and resilience, which through time, through abuse, through mismanagement, you lost. So it's like a super panchakarma over a month or even longer.
Like we were saying, the panchakarma was the big gun. The kaya kapha is the super nuclear gun.
Nuclear explosion.
Right? Well, nuclear transformation, right? I mean, that's basically what happens. You get uncomfortable and you push the body, and then you are rewarded by the results, because nothing good comes for free. I mean, I don't know, I popped into my head just a minute ago what the expression was, is that, I can't remember it now because it slipped away, but the old proverb where you got to work hard to get some good results, right? And it's with your health too. You can't just say, I'll take 2 pills and call me in the morning, you'll be fine.
Yeah.
Nobody
Or we'll
believes
knock
that.
you out, we'll cut you open, we'll sew you back up and you'll be fine, which a lot of people fall for that one too.
And as you know, you went through knee surgery, it doesn't feel good afterwards, and it isn't fulfilling.
No.
You feel lacking on some level.
Okay, we're gonna go into some pictures now. So for those who have who are watching this, and if you're not watching this, we'll describe what we're seeing. So this looks like a Shirodara. So Shiro head. Yep, go ahead.
It's a panchakarma. That's the Shirodara portion of the kaya kalpa, kaya kalpa.
And so for those who don't understand, so Shirodara is where we pour a steady stream, not a drip, but a steady stream of oil over the third eye chakra, so over the forehead.
But there's some of the kaya kalpa paste coming off.
Look at how old is Light in this? She looks like she's in her 30s.
That would have been Taos, New Mexico, probably 1995.
Oh, and there you are. Look how young you look, Bryan. Oh my gosh. I just want to pause and thank you all for being devoted to carrying the work from the past into the future.
Well,
Because I mean, I know so much right now, like so many traditions are dying, so much sacred wisdom around healing, around plants, around these formulas that have been made forever. It's like they have to connect generation to generation. And that's how, the innovation that happens that you describe, Bryan, I so appreciate. Let's talk about these next pictures of this building of the hut. And I'm going to be very selfish here. I have this piece of land on this creek, and I want to build into it. I want to dig out because there's this big ledge that then goes onto a top field. So I just want to dig right into it, and to have a darkness, cave like healing space for me and my friends and family.
so the idea of the Kuti hut is you want to create a dark, warm, quiet environment like the womb, like going back to the womb. You can be reborn by going back. And so this is started with a pile of 22 tons of oyster shells put into bags, and then using the bags as a building unit and making a circular hut. And then I had to put a roof on it because I was afraid my wife would get crushed with all that weight. So we supported the roof and put more bags on top to make it quiet. And then we thatched it to make it waterproof, because this was Florida in the summer, rainy season. We put a ceiling coat of adobe on top and waterproofed it and thatched it. And the funny thing was, the neighbors looked out one day and they couldn't tell what this big thatched thing was in the background of my backyard. And I just said, oh, I made a meditation hut for my wife. And they had no idea it was anything this substantial. But inside it was very quiet and very dark. She had a bathtub that we could do the kayak off of. There's Selene and her
Hey, there's
sister,
Selene. I've never seen that.
Julie.
Great.
And we put adobe with straw on the inside walls. Selene's planning the decorations.
Ah, of course. The designer.
I mean, I remember those bags and lugging them and placing them, and oh my gosh, my back is aching just thinking about those.
I think you're strong, Greg.
Well, I was stronger then. I would want to do it now, that's for sure. There we are.
Then Selene decorated it with saris on the inside. And we put yoga mats or straw mats on the floor. And she had her bathtub with hot and cold water. She had her altar. She had a bed to sleep on. She had a big rug, a big Persian rug to do yoga on. So she went in to that dark place for a month. Every other day we did a Kayakalpa treatment. And on the odd days, we went in and did some sort of four-handed massage or something. Every day we made her fresh juices. We had a team of, about 6 or 8 people who were serving her. So people would be making juice, preparing special foods, making special herb teas. So Light had her provisions every day. She was in silence. She took some notes. The first few days, she was sending out a furious flurry of notes. Do this, do that. Don't forget this. And we sent back a note. Let go, let go.
Let go.
I would need that same note. Greg, can't you totally see me doing the same thing?
Completely. Hey, what about this? Can we do this? No. Just
So,
receive.
there's her altar. She had some candles and a lamp, but mostly she was in darkness, high humidity and warmth. It was 85 degrees outside and inside.
Wow.
July and August in Florida. Holy smokes.
It was a rainy season. We had trouble keeping the moisture out of that structure. It did not have time to dry. I should have built a big fire in it and just let it burn to dry it out. But I made it the month before, and it needed more time.
So what was the result for her? Like, what did you see in her?
She came out very grateful and very gracious of the treatment. She came out with a whole book of notes, she wrote her second book out of that, right? And
Which
she
one? The family remedies, or?
Yeah. And then she came out truly inspired and on fire and went on a tear with new ways to go about sharing globally the Ayurveda. And that's when the school began, right, Bryan? Right after that? That's when the school started.
She came out of that with a whole plan to build a healing center. And within 2 months, we had a 5,000 square foot, 2-story center that we installed a Ayurvedic restaurant, a Panchakarma center, a yoga center, a school of Ayurveda. It was all happening out of the central location. We had an herbal apothecary. We had an essential oil apothecary. It was amazing. That all came out of her being in the Kuti hut. The only physical thing that happened was she had this streak of gray across the front of her hair that she slightly vainly would always dye once a month. But she came out and it was black, and she didn't have to do anything for like 6 months, it stayed black. Her hair did turn black again. You know, she wanted some new teeth because she was missing one here and one there, and she didn't get that. But she postulated that it would have taken a year or perhaps a more detailed herbal knowledge of what herbs can stimulate a new set of teeth. And I will say that in all of Ayurveda, there's this search for Amrit, the nectar of immortality. It's spoken of in the Vedas, that the sages came together and they took this Amrit and they received enlightenment. They became enlightened. So there's always been this search for Amrit. And I think Panchakarma releases an inner Amrit that comes from our endocrine system. I think Kaya Kalpa and the extremes, the tapas, I think the ice treatments, even with the Iceman, I think that releases Amrit. Yeah. And I think some of the journeys that we do with our psychotropics, I think that taps into Amrit production. I think Tantra sex is another way of finding that Amrit and releasing it.
I've been doing research on Shivambu, and this is my sense. So Shiva and Ambu water. So Shivambu is God water. Shivambu is the practice of urine therapy, or the making of your own medicine. And what we know globally about Shivambu is the experts use aged urine. So it ferments over time and grows stem cells and growth hormone, which really fits in with, you guys are talking about like big guns, right? Like big gun Ojas production. If we look at it from an allopathic model, we would find stem cells, we would find growth hormone.
Or if you look at it from the homeopathic model, it has everything that's killing you. It's got every waste product that your body's getting rid of.
And by microdosing, right?
Yeah, by taking that microdose back, you're making your body immune to it so that it can't touch you. So you have the antidote, like cures like. Yeah.
And you have the medicine because you've got the electrolytes. We now know that urine is probiotic and prebiotic. We know it's very, very high in amino acids. So you have the building blocks of protein. We know that it's very high in minerals. So if we're talking about regrowing teeth, and what happens with the aged is you have higher urea and uric acid compared to water. So the water evaporates off. It's fermenting, so it's growing in the good stuff. So up the nose and the mouth, right? Swishing it in the mouth, snorting it in the nose, compresses on the skin, in the anus, belly button, vulva, like any hole you got, ears. Yeah. So my guess is this. So if we go to Amrita or Soma, and now let's, in this closing, as we're wrapping up, because I know I have about 5 more hours of questions, but we don't have 5 hours of time. Is my guess is we also have the psilocybins, or we also have the psychedelics, whether it's psilocybins or other plant medicines that are in the psychotropic category, the psychotropic psychedelic category. Because what we know about urine therapy and psychedelics is that people would capture their urine when they're on psychedelics. So to me, when you couple all of that together, like we're getting closer into, and then you age it. So say you do an ayahuasca trip and you age that pee, say you're doing panchakarma and you include a psychedelic so that you can go deeper, faster, further, right? Then you capture that pee, you age that pee because you've been having all these good herbs and all this good food. Now we're getting closer and closer in my book to like Soma or Amrita.
Yeah, absolutely.
I know with the Amanita muscaria, traditionally the shaman would eat it, and then the disciples, hi doggy. Oh,
this is my other doggy.
Disciples would drink his pee. So that makes sense.
Let's talk about, I mean, when I was in Mexico with you a couple of weeks ago, Greg, I was saying, like, you know, a couple of years ago, you throw a tennis ball, you're going to hit a yoga teacher. And now what I'm finding is, like, you throw a tennis ball, you're going to hit a psychedelic healer or psychedelic retreat or a journey, or right. So what we're seeing now is this return of all the plant medicines and all of the human-made medicines, which might include MDMA or ketamine or, I mean, the list goes on and on, LSD.
The code medicine is very popular too, which
The
helps
toad
you
medicine,
purge
kombu.
in an hour. You just get rid of a bunch of toxins. It goes through the body, and I've seen some amazing results from some of my clients that have done the komba, and it's the most profound effect that I saw was the amount of fascia release, and the tonicity just goes and melts. Like someone that's really hard and you can't push in, and then they did the komba and the toad venom, and they came back the next session and there was like a 1/4 inch of softness instead of hardness. It was really profound. And so over 3 or 4 sessions, all of a sudden this woman is loose and alive and moving, which is what life is about, is to be able to move and free to do that. It was very, very interesting.
Before that, she was what, like had more fibrosis or stenosis or sclerosis or hardening?
Not necessarily any of those things, just her body was so tight and trapped. She didn't have ability. She would do Pilates and whatnot, but after she started doing that and the work with the osteopathic work that I do, she all of a sudden loose, and mobile, and her tissue was just soft. Bryan, how like sometimes in the Panchakarma you have those tight people, and then by the end of the Panchakarma, their skin, you can actually sink into the skin. It's like a cleansing happens. Something profound just was eliminated and is gone, and they have freedom of movement, and it's a wonderful thing.
And I think some of us build up a hardening in our tissues, and it's not just muscle tension. It's concretization would be the word I would use. Coming concrete. So anything that I'm real interested in this toad venom. I hadn't heard that, and I would like to be more flexible. So I'm going to check that out.
So if I just want to notice that, the 3 of us are trained in Panchakarma. The 3 of us have devoted our lives to the Vedic healing arts in some form for another for decades. And the 3 of us are now talking about psychedelic medicines, which really they weren't part of my classical training. I don't know if they were part of anyone else's training. But we're also saying that, there's allusions to this. There's in the ancient texts, so we're talking about these medicines that have these massive breakthrough experiences, and they're referred to as soma or amrita. What do you guys think is happening? Like, I really sense that there's a coming together of having access again to all the plants. That like brings this story to mind of, I don't know if you guys have heard the story, but it's like the guru of the Ayurvedic herbal medicine clinic kind of thing, hundreds of years ago, has 100 people trying to graduate, sends them all out into the forest, says find a plant that's not a medicine, right? And they all trickle back one by one with this plant and that plant and that plant and that plant. And the guru's like, oh my God, no.
You all failed.
You all failed. And then the last one comes back and after 30 days and says, like, I can find one, right? And he's the one that passes.
Everything is medicine. Even pee.
Even pee, even cow poop. Cow poop's the microbiome.
I tell you, Kate, I'm not kissing you. I think it's wonderful, but I do want to, and Light was not a person for psychotropics. She did some, but she was a real believer that whatever you can get on the outside, you can have produced on the inside, that there's introphic psychedelics that your own body can make, and that these these various yogas and meditations, samadhis, they're all taking you to that same place. And that for me, I use it as a reset or a reconnection with the divine, because it does seem to slip away, with our busy life. And somehow we just always make it busy. I don't know how, but we do.
Yeah, and I just want to say, like with my dad, with the psilocybins, like I couldn't convince him to do a panchakarma. Now I might be able to. Right now, after some of the deep ama is purged, now there's a different person, right? There's a different level of him to connect with. So my sense too is that can be another piece of the puzzle, that like what you can do in a few hours or in a day, it can get people over a hurdle. That,
Yes,
right?
Absolutely.
it's been used a lot at end of life for producing a profound level of peace for the transition.
So Greg, tell people how they can get in touch with you if they want to do panchakarma with you.
They can reach me through the website, or the contact page, I think is working, pretty sure. Or they can leave in the notes my email and or my phone number, my WhatsApp down here in Mexico.
So tridosha.com, TRIDOSHA.com.
Right. And then the email for my business would be healingtridosha@gmail.
Okay, fantastic. And we'll share Bryan's Instagram on the show notes. I just want to really thank you guys for like the work you've done, Bryan, for this deep stories of life's journey. And I just feel like so grateful that I know how to now build my kuti hut and check this this out and invite you guys up.
We're doing stuff with something called Aircrete, which I think you would really like.
Oh.
AIRCRETE. You can look it up, but yeah. So, and thank you, Kate, for bringing this whole Ayurvedic community together in a very insightful. I mean, the questions that you bring, the people you put together, it's amazing. So, thank you for your work.
Oh, my pleasure, and I look forward to part 2. So we'll be in contact. Thanks, guys.
Thank you. Have a great day.
Namaste.